Hey, CDC ambassadors, I hope you're having a great summer. I know that I am. My name is Wes Wade, and I think you probably know a little bit about me by now from the 30-second elevator speech. I hope that you got to look at mine. I definitely got to look at yours, and I was completely amazed at all the amazing things that you're doing this summer. That is a big accomplishment and it's going to take you far. I'm really excited to get to know more of you after reading some of those. Plus, it was great that everybody got on that quickly and got it done. So I can really see that you're a group who's hungry, you're excited about what you do. There seems to be a real honest passion about this as well. So what I want to do today is I want to do the resume portion of our summer training. Now this is a 10-minute video. I'm going to try to slow down while being quick at the same time. So I might stumble on my words a little bit here, but what we're going to do with the resumes in this video is go over the basics. The basics are going to be important. I know some of you who are returning ambassadors, you know this blindfolded upside down. So please continue to help out the newer ambassadors because you're going to be a great resource for all of us. Now, the basics are going to be important because resumes is a big part of what you're going to do as a CDC ambassador. It's going to be important for you and for your fellow students that you're working with. So just a piece of philosophy that I like to start with to get this video going. Don't wrap your resume up in the terms of it defines you. We dump a lot of our lives onto these resumes, our experiences, our education, sometimes our interests. And it can kind of have the feeling that this is you on a paper summed up. And it is you. It does describe you. It does give a little glimpse of a story about you, but it does not define you. I just like saying that because sometimes it can kind of take your mood down when you put a resume out and someone doesn't like it. It doesn't define you. But what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that your resumes are home runs. So what I like to do as a resume is I look at it as a key. A well-crafted key can open a door. A master key, a well-crafted master key, can open all of the doors, right? So if you have a poorly crafted key or a poorly made resume, you're not going to be opening those doors for the opportunities that you want. So let's go forward and let's look at some strengths and weaknesses because I think that's an important part when we're talking about resumes. Your strengths and your weaknesses are going to be important because you can write better resumes, you can write better cover letters, and you can become a better interviewer. So right here what we have is a list of the 10 essential skills that employers are looking for from college graduates. The National Association of Colleges Employers puts this survey out every year. They interview employers and they find this out. This is not just about GPA or your major. This is about what employers actually want to see that you have, that you embody. So what I would say is you should take a minute to press pause and just look at these, write them down. And then after that, I would rank them. I would rank them in terms of what areas are you strongest and what areas are you weakest or what areas do you need improvement in. In those areas where you need improvement, write a development plan about what you're going to do to get stronger in those weaker areas. Imagine when you're interviewing and someone asks the question, well, tell me about your weaknesses. Now you get to say, well, I'm not as good at analyzing quantitative data, but here's some of the things that I'm doing to get better at that. Man, you really look like a professional at that point. Now, in your resume, this is great to know these things, but how do you communicate them? You communicate them through action verbs. So here's something that you're going to get very familiar with is going to be the job search guide. And I think on pages 10 and 11, you are going to have some great action verbs here, a lot more than what's on this slide. So I'm not sure if you'll actually be able to see that or not, but there's a lot of action verbs there. I would get familiar with it because it's going to help to give your resume some character, some pop, a good, strong, confident tone that when someone reads it, it's the difference from I distributed surveys to employees versus created surveys to use with employees that received an 80% return rate. Now, what's the difference in those two things? What was the action verb that I replaced versus the first sentence that I read? Okay, well, what else did I do? I took I out. That's not an action verb part, but that's a big area that you should know. You're going to see a lot of resumes. And I promise you that some of them are going to have pronouns. No pronouns. Do not use I in there. Just use those action verbs. It's going to change the dynamic of your resume. And definitely make sure that you use this guide to help you develop some of those action words. Now, once you have, the idea of your strengths and weaknesses, you're looking at some of these action verbs, how do you organize everything? What's your structure? I love this picture here. I love the Great Pyramids. I think they're really cool. I haven't got to see them yet, but I will. Now, the Great Pyramids, like any great structure, is amazing. Okay, so you can see the Great Pyramids from space. I don't think we need to see your resume from space, but I went to NC State. I wasn't an engineering student, but I understand what good structure is, and your resume is going to have good structure as well. Now, you'll see that I listed some areas, some typical areas that you've probably seen on a resume before, but you need to make your structure yours. If you have a lot of volunteer experience, then that's a section that you need in your structure. If you don't have a lot of volunteer experience, then I probably wouldn't have a section that says volunteer on my resume. So make sure that your structure is something that speaks to your strengths, because this is your resume. It's always good to look at example resumes, but don't just look at that example and try to make yours exactly the same. You have to make a structure that works for you. Also, it's a very good practice to have a copy of the job application out that you're applying for. That way you can make it yours, and you can make it about that job application, and you can make that structure match. That way you have this beautiful resume that talks about your strengths. It uses action verbs, and it has a good structure that flows. Now, what do you put in that structure? Well, that's where you're going to start trying to highlight your experience. And this is a really critical area. I might actually just spend a little bit more time talking about this than I originally thought. And one of the reasons is there was a study out that when hiring managers or whoever it's going to be that's looking at the resumes, the first time around when they're trying to figure out who they're going to interview, they usually only look at those resumes for 30 seconds. That's not a long time. You have 30 seconds to make an impression on that resume. So what do? You need to draw out your experiences. You need to highlight them. How do you highlight them? Well, first you need to identify them. I see this so often with students, especially students who have so many accomplishments. They just kind of seem that it's like they think everybody has these accomplishments. All of you in your 30-second elevator speeches, those are stories in there that you can draw out in some of those experiences that you can highlight on a resume if it suits the job that you're going for. But let's take a look. Are you a volunteer? What kind of organization do you volunteer in? What kind of work do you do when you volunteer? Are you an honor student? Are you a president of an honor society? Are you in a frat or sorority? What kind of things do you do within that frat or sorority? Do you work in addition to going to school? These are things that you do that you probably don't even really think twice about. An example was when I was in college at NC State, I worked at Eddie Bauer, one of the many jobs that I had, right at Crabtree Mall. It was in a different location then, but right at Crabtree Mall. And I didn't really think anything of the experience, but there was a lot that I did. I managed inventory. I managed the sales floor. I hit some great numbers while I was there too. I managed clients. I worked with customer service. I could tell stories about working with a difficult client. There was a lot of interesting things that you can pull out from your experience. So don't overlook that. Feel free to gloat. I know no one wants to be that guy or that woman who's like, oh, I'm so awesome. I did this. I'm great. Hey, we're not hanging out with that person. We're just trying to make the resume right now. Now, the other thing is we have a little image here of a heat map. So there was this study where they were doing eye tracking, and they're following where everybody's eyes are going when they're looking at the resume. And they noticed that on that first go around during that 30 seconds, everybody's eyes tend to stay towards the top of the resume. So what you want to do is those great areas of experience that you have, you want to put them closer to the top. So that means your structure is going to have to fit your experience that you're going to highlight, because you want to have those good things towards the top. So I hope that's a good overview of those areas. Let's look at an example of a resume that works. This resume works for a lot of reasons. One, it's very appealing to the eye. It has a good flow to it. It has the contact information up there, education, experience. Did you notice that it doesn't say work experience? It only says experience. And even though this person only listed work experience, I think that's a good point. What if you're a college student or you're working with a college student who doesn't have a lot of work experience? That's when you start wanting to highlight the experience that they have. Ask questions, draw those things out. And instead of work experience, you can write experience or relevant experience as a section, as your structural format for your resume here. That way you're not just focusing on work. Work is not the only experience that matters. Volunteer experience matters. This past year, I was co-chair on the AAF, the American Advertising Federation, and I had some great experience for that, but that wasn't a job. I didn't get paid for it. Now, the other thing is when you're looking at this and you look under experience, I don't know if you can see this that well, but Lauren here did some great action verbs. She has things like trained and coordinated and maintained. So this is a good example of a resume that works. And again, I would go to here, pages 12 through 24. That's 12 pages of resumes. Those are good examples that you can take, steal, okay, but put your own words in there. Don't plagiarize resumes. And you can really make your own resume, but definitely use this guide. This job search guide is going to become a handy resource for you. Now, the other thing that I'll say, and this is going to be the last point that we make before we wrap up, is going to be that your appearance matters. So when you're creating this document, you're crafting this key that's going to open doors and opportunities, your appearance is going to matter. That resume that worked, when we looked at that, it looked good. You know, it had a good flow to it. It was the sections were justified to the right, and everything was lined up in a certain way. There's a reason why there's a saying, if you want a certain role, you got to dress that part. You know, if I went to go work at a company and I wanted to be the CEO one day, but I'm working in the mailroom, I'm not going to come in, a polo shirt or basketball shorts. I'm going to come in there looking professional, like the CEO of the mailroom, because one day I want to be in that. I'm going to start acting like that now. So there's some ways to get creative with your appearance of your resume. Take it seriously. Give it to coworkers, give it to other volunteers, give it to friends, people that you trust to look at it so you can get another opinion of how it's supposed to be. Another thing is make sure that you don't have a bunch of grammar issues. That's going to be a killer. Your appearance as far as grammar is going to be king. It's going to be critical. If you got a bunch of spelled words, it's going to immediately put you down in that circular filing bin that everybody refers to, which is the trash can, even though my trash can's a rectangle. So the last thing that I would say is, this is a really cool tip that someone who works in the CDC told me. Maybe her name's Jenna, I don't know, but it was a really good thing. Wordle.net was a cool tool. Copy and paste, or copy your resume and then paste it into Wordle, and it makes these graphic images of all the words that's on that document. I wouldn't put your contact information in there. I don't know what they keep, but just copy all of the body of the resume, the context of the resume, and it'll show you what themes you have going on. Let's think about this. If you are going after a job, and that job wants to have someone who's really good at communication, so that means you want to highlight your communication, and you put your resume into Wordle, and the words that are popping out is stuff about, I'm great in the lab or something along those lines. It doesn't say a whole lot of communication. Then you're going to want to change that up. So those are some good tools and practices. I hope this wasn't too long. I hope this wasn't too basic. I think that you were able to get some good things out of this, and I look forward to seeing you in the next module. See you soon, Ambassadors.